So Blane, let's take a few minutes and tell our viewers a little bit about the equipment that we've been using the past couple of days, and give them a little bit of insight into the stuff you use for Musky here in Virginia. And of course, the same type of stuff, I'm sure, would be the similar type gear as to what Chris Willen would use, or just about anybody fishing for Musky. It's not going to change all that much, I don't believe.
Not really.
No.
It's, you know, it's kind of a universal game.
First and foremost, the rods. Of course, I've been fishing with the Esox rod, which is your original rod from TFO. Still in the line right now for 2020, and I believe into 2021. And I love this thing. It's I've done some musky fishing with it, but I tell you where I've been using the Esox rod. I take it to Brazil on our peacock bass trips, and for the same reason that you showed, by being able to put the butt of that rod up against your arm, man, it just takes a lot of the casting load off. Peacock bass fishing, as you know, is very labor intensive, just like this is. You're slinging big flies all day long. But then also when I'm retrieving, I can kind of put it up under my arm and make a much more comfortable retrieve, and I'm not having to, have my arm out there. So it saves a lot of arm fatigue. But what rods are you using primarily? I mean, I would assume the Esox.
Yeah, I've been using that for years.
Yeah.
And for one, when we designed that rod, a lot of people have a tendency to think when you are throwing big flies, you need a super fast action rod, which in reality is the exact opposite. Fast rods recoil so quickly that what ends up happening when you have a big fly, it creates shock. And what happens is that shock reverberates through the rod and goes into your arm. So over time, a fast rod punishes you physically much quicker, if that makes sense.
It does.
So when we designed this rod, we wanted a rod that would bend deeper into the rod to help absorb that shock that these bigger flies will. Not saying that it's not capable of handling, that's the misconception with fly rods and especially big fly casting rods. That they think super fast, super stiff is what you need. Yes, if you were only casting 50 times a day.
Sure.
But if you're casting 200, 300, 400 times a day, that will pretty much put you in the hospital. That's pretty, to be short with it.
Yeah.
But that rod was the beginning. It served its purpose, and it's done it. I mean, it's caught countless muskies for me, peacock bass, as you said. I took it to Baja, casting from the beach.
We use it for pike also in Ohio.
Yep. There's a lot of striper fishing on the beach, a lot of different things. Anytime you're wanting to cast a big fly, this rod is something that I feel will help most people. I think, everybody has a different casting style, but this rod is based on the mangrove blank, which in all the years I've been guiding, which is 30 years now, any client from any type of background and any casting style can pick up that rod and cast it well. It's a rod that feels good in your hands. You can feel it load, feel it unload, and it's just a pleasure to cast.
Yeah.
So we took a lot of that taper and a lot of that design, and we built the Esox series from that.
Well, I'm glad you did. It's been a great selling rod, and I love fishing with it. So the big news that I think we can announce is that there's a new version coming.
Yes.
And I caught a fish on this rod today.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, and that fly. And also with the TFO, the BVK SD, Bernard Victor Cray sealed drag fly reel, which was new last year.
Yes.
And it's a fantastic reel for the money. But anyways, tell us about the upcoming Game Changer series of rods from TFO.
So with the mangrove series that we've had for a while, as like a lot of things, resins change. There's new improvements in materials and all that stuff. Some things go away. So the resin, some of the stuff that made the mangrove series and the Esox series so strong and durable is not available anymore. So there's been new breakthroughs in fibers and all that kind of stuff that that we're using on the A2Xs, the legacy rods. So we were talking, and for me, targeting a lot of big species and throwing big flies, I felt like it was time to kind of rejuvenate the series. And so we decided we were going to come out with the Game Changer series, the GC series, and these are the first couple prototypes of that. And I'm super excited about it because it's going to be my thoughts and rods and the years that I've been doing this, and I feel like it's going to be my rod. And I think it's definitely specialized, but I think it's going to cover, in my opinion, it's going to cover a ton of bases. It's going to be a rod that someone can throw small flies on. It's going to be very durable. It's going to be very easy to cast. So from someone that likes a softer rod to someone that likes a fast rod, I think they'll be able to appreciate this. And the most important thing is it allows people to stay in the game a long time, and that's what's really important. Because if you get fatigued, you're not going to fish as well.
No.
So it's very important to have a rod that's going to feel light in your hands, going to feel comfortable, and something that's not going to punish you.
Yeah, it's amazing how light they are. I mean, they almost felt like a short rod to me, and the balance in the hand. As much as I love the Esox, I can already tell that you've made improvements on this rod. You're also going to have recoil stripping guides on there. And as you explained to me, musky fishing can be pretty brutal on tackle, and also the figure eighting can be very brutal on tackle.
A lot of damage. A lot of damage right here and right here to a lot of the rods that I've used over the years.
As you're scraping them up along the bow of the boat, when you're figure eight, it makes total sense. And when when it's banging around in the boat, and then of course total mayhem when you hook a fish and you're banging up against stuff. Just makes sense. And those recoil guides, I know that Flip has used them on the new Axiom 2X. He loves them, swears by them, and I'm thrilled to see them on the new rod. So
me too.
Well, we can't wait, man. The new Game Changer series from TFO. You probably heard it here first. We'll probably get in trouble for for making that announcement, but
I think they'll be okay with it.
Yeah, probably. I was a real honor to be able to fish some of these prototypes, and absolutely loved them. This one was a ton of fun to throw. Of course, I was throwing a fly that was half the length, but
and the cool thing is we've been able to expand the series from not just super high big game stuff where you're throwing giant flies, but we wanted to downsize it for those that are targeting big brown trout, and throwing big flies to big browns where you don't need, 350 to 500 grain type line. And that's where, like you said, with that one, it's such a pleasure to cast. It holds up. It presents the flies well. It allows you to be able to cast long distances without destroying your arm.
Oh yeah,
which to me is the most important part.
No, that thing was a launcher. I was able to throw that fly much further than I thought I could, so that's exciting. And then of course, to wrap up rods, probably at some point in this video, I've mentioned the fact that not my first time throwing a two-handed rod, but I'm certainly not a two-handed guy, but you're throwing two-handed rods, and the one we used to the past couple of days is the new Legacy rod, the Lefty Cray Legacy rod from TFO. TFO has several other two-handed models, but the one we were using is a what? It's a
12-foot 8-weight.
12-foot 8-weight.
Which has a pretty, if you look at it, I forget what the grain weight window is on that. I think it's so it's 525 to 650.
It's a heavy rod.
It is, and as you saw, it can carry a 12, 14-inch fly out there, 70, 80, 100 feet if you need it, without, again, hurting your body.
When you first pulled this out, I thought it was absolutely crazy. And I made the comment before, if you would have told me last week that I would be fishing a two-handed, a spay style rod for muskie, I would have said absolutely no way. Can't be done, shouldn't be done. And you absolutely schooled me. And in about 5 minutes of you watching you and you doing the demo and showing me how to do it, I got it. I understood. I see why you're doing it. And it allows people that maybe can't make that long of a cast to do it easily, not tear up their shoulders, not tear up their body. And then you're going to catch more fish because you're able to cover more water.
Which is huge.
It's a really simple concept. And then the thing that I would have been always concerned about is setting the hook on a fish. But in this style of fishing, you're not using the rod to set the hook.
Not at all.
So you point the rod straight at the fish, strip, and the rod's not even in the equation.
Nope.
And the more you can keep the rod out of the equation, the better off you are. So that's been a huge revelation and a learning curve for me with the two-handed rods. I've got a lot of practice on casting the two-handers, but it's it's really not that tough. I got better as the day went on, and next time we do this, I promise I will be a much better two-handed rod caster. The reels, I mean, let's face it, a good disc drag, preferably machine reel, but any reel that's going to hold up to big game. Of course, I mentioned the TFO BVK, fantastic reel at a reasonable price. We've got the TFO power reels, and of course I'm a big fan of the Nautilus reels. I fish Nautilus in the salt and for big game. Any big game reel that's going to withstand the fight of a big fish is going to do the trick. Is there anything special that you look for in a reel?
For me, musky fishing specifically, I'm just looking to lighten everything up.
Okay.
So the lighter it is in your hand, the easier it is going to be over a 7, 8, 9, 10-hour day.
That's a good point.
It reduces fatigue, and that's what I would look at when you go for a musky reel specifically. That's just musky fishing, because really, when you fight them, and you fought a fish that's as big as they get almost, you know, and you don't get them on the reel, you fight them. So the reel, the important thing about the reel is if they do take line out, make sure it's smooth, make sure you got enough drag on it. But for me, it's light, and you want to have I like the large arbor deal because what it does is it reduces line twist or line coils, so for me, and if you have to reel quickly, it takes up line faster.
That's a good point about the line coil and the line twist. That's one of the benefits of the large arbor that I think a lot of people neglect to recognize, and a lot of people that are selling reels fail to promote the fact that the line comes off in larger coils. And when you're fishing with these sink tips and sinking lines and intermediate lines, it's a big deal. And if you're going to make that cast and it's tangled up at your feet, you don't make the cast. So,
right.
Speaking of lines, what kind of lines are you using on a day in, day out basis for muskie?
So as you saw, there's several scenarios where you encounter the fish in different areas. So sometimes they're in deep water with not much current, and you need the fly to get down quickly. But sometimes you want that fly to get down, but you don't want it to get down too fast. So there you have the problem. So one, you have to adjust the fly type that you throw at them, but then you have to adjust that with the line that you're using. So sometimes if you have deep water, like 10, 12, 15, 20 feet with current, you need a fast sinking line and a fly like this bigger one that's going to absorb water quickly, that's going to dive down with the line. In other circumstances, when the fish are not very frisky, sometimes you have to keep that fly, I call it marinating, where you have to keep the fly in their face for a long time. And then I would want more of a buoyant fly with a fast sinking line. So when you start decreasing the depth and coming into shallower water, and you have faster currents, I like to have a fast sinking line with a faster sinking fly because it's going to be swept by. So, you know, I work with Scientific Angler, and you know, I know you being a fly shop, you sell different lines, but so specifically for me, SA makes a specific line called the Musky line, but they've also got other types of sinking lines like their Sonar series 357s, where you don't have a hinge in it, where you get this belly. You know, you'll have more of a uniform sink, which is very important in those situations I talked about earlier.
Absolutely, yeah.
But then you run into situations where you need an intermediate line, to where you really have to fish slow and keep a fly there and not much current, where you not have to worry about getting the fly hung up. So that's when I switch to an intermediate line, which will sink 1 to 3 seconds. You know, it'll sink about I don't know, 1 to 2 inches per second, something like that. I mean, it can vary depending on the type fly and currents and all that stuff. But intermediates, I think, are one of the most overlooked lines out there, in my opinion.
No question.
And I use it more than any line that I use throughout the year. And they have several lines. They have this new intermediate line. It's more of a camo series that I've been playing with recently, and I just got back from false albacore fishing. I used that down there. I used it down in Louisiana for reds, and we just used it today.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed throwing that line. Yeah.
And then you have floating lines, which I don't use as much in the musky game, but there are situations where you will encounter fish that will eat on top or near the surface. So, you know, it's good. I think personally, you know, rods, reels are important, but lines are the most overlooked thing in our industry personally.
Correct.
And that will make, and I say that a lot, and I'm sure rod companies don't love it, but I personally think you could have $1,000 rod and have the wrong line on it, and it'll feel like $100 rod.
That's correct.
And you could have a $100 rod and have the perfect line for this perfect situation, and it's going to feel like $1,000 rod at times. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to, I guess, suit the situation at hand. You know, these rods are designed to do specific things, and when you combine them with the right line, it doesn't get any better.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. And that's why you spend the money to do it, you know?
We've always said at Mad River Outfitters, in our schools, classes, a YouTube channel, everything we do, that you're really only as good as your fly line, especially in this case. I'm a big leader guy, as you may know. You know, in a lot of scenarios, I think you're only as good as your leader.
That too.
But the fly line, and especially in this game, in this musky game, it's all about the lines.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably times in the past 2 days where neither you nor I really cared what the rod was. We picked that outfit up because of the line.
Yep.
So that we got the fly at the right place at the right time so we could begin our retrieve. So it's really a line game. And I think the moral of the story is there's absolutely no way that you nor I nor anybody could say, buy this line, that is the best musky line out there. Maybe the closest, if you had to pick one, would be the Scientific Angler's Musky. That's going to do a variety of different things.
It does do a lot of, yes. But they have another one, that their Sonar Sync Cold, the 25. That's a good line too. I've used that forever.
But you got to have intermediate lines as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. I had a fly shop for years, and I know you've had one, you know.
30 years, yeah.
Right. So people want the quick answer, and it's very rare in life, and no matter what you do, that you're going to find that, right? But
Sure.
But you always, not everybody's got all the money in the world to spend on certain things. So then you start diving into what kind of fishing are you doing, what type of da-da-da-da-da. For me, you know, if I were going to have two lines, I would have an intermediate, and then I would have a faster sink.
Yeah.
And it's all about carrying the fly to the target and then presenting it and putting it in the right depth at the right time,
Right.
with currents and speeds. So that's the question you need to ask yourself: what and where and how you're going to do it, and then you go from there.
And call your local fly shop that knows about musky. and tell them where you're fishing, tell them what kind of water you're fishing in, and they're going to pick the right line, or probably, like we said, the right lines. Any good musky angler is going to have 2, 3, 4, maybe more sink rates and sinking lengths of line on the boat at any given time.
Yep.
You know, of course, the flies we're using were all variations of Game Changers. I think you call this the Polar Changer?
Polar Express.
Polar
yes.
Express. I hear Pat Kelly talk about the Polar Express a lot. It's one of his favorites, of course. But we kept migrating back to the black ones.
Yep.
Which I was kind of surprised. I don't often think of black as being a big musky color. I see the pinks and the reds and yellows and the chartreuses. But we kept really going back to that black. And so it must be a thing. And then, good Lord, I mean, look at the size of that fly. I mean, and we kept alternating between big and small to try to figure out what they were doing. But it's almost a subject on a different video. But before we wrap up, can you tell us a little bit about the leader that you might use, or the leader formula
Sure.
that you would use, and the basics on how you rig it up?
Yeah. So as technical as I'll get on all the other stuff, I get really simple on the leaders, believe it or not.
I noticed that.
I try to keep it as simple as possible, but there's a reason for that. I'll usually make my leader 40 or 30 pound fluorocarbon straight off the fly line. And I'll make it generally about 5 foot.
Okay.
And then I'll have a 20-inch piece of wire, and it could vary. Like I told you, I like the 1x7 nickel titanium.
From Scientific Anglers.
From SA.
Yeah.
That's my favorite because I fish a lot of super clear water. As you saw, I mean, it's super, you could see down 15, 20 foot and see the bottom and count the pebbles.
That's interesting. You know, we hear a lot on that, what was it, the 1x7? 1x7?
Nickel titanium.
We hear a lot of people say that they're afraid of that because it's not coated.
Right. And after you tie a knot, it will fray. But I have not ever had one fail. Not one.
There you go.
I've caught as big of muskies as I've seen, you know, well over 50 inches, you know, so you're not going to convince me that it's going to fail.
Okay. Well, you called it a game-changing material, and I saw it today. I saw it work. You know, I tied a fly on with it. It's I see no reason to doubt it.
Yeah, I think it's fabulous. But I would like to talk a little bit more why I keep that leader simple.
Yeah, please do. Sorry.
So when you make a long cast, and sometimes like you saw today, we had really poor angles with sunlight, and you can't see if a fish is coming and tracking your fly. And I would preach the whole time is like, keep your rod low, and as the fly approaches, keep the rod deep and get the fly moving. So the one thing I want to make sure, and we talked about this a lot too, it's like you can always feel, even if you have your rod in muddy water and you have your rod 4 feet down and you can't see anything, you can feel the click of the fly line in your leader hit the rod tip. And if you know that you have a 4.5 to 5 foot leader, you can make one long strip and you are 20 inches from your fly. And that is the exact spot that I like to keep the fly when I am doing a figure eight. Because anything longer, you can make a maneuver, and it takes a little bit more time for that fly to move with what your rod is doing. And any hesitation at the boat in certain situations can be detrimental to a fish eating your fly or seeing you and turning around and leaving. So you want to keep it frantic. You want to keep it simple. You feel the click, make one long strip, and continue to move the fly as you do that, and then the fly will respond to what your rod's doing. So that's why I keep it that simple.
I experienced that many, many times today, especially when I was fishing the black flies. I couldn't always see where they were, but when I heard that leader come through the tip, I knew where I was, and like you said, I got to the point where I was just making one strip, and then I was ready to do my figure eight.
Yeah. Just keep that part, you know, just there's so much to think about, as you saw, and there's so many things to remember and how to figure eight, and trying to make that fish, that first turn to be on a downstream angle to where they eat when they're going away. There's so many things that you're trying to remember, and then you see that fish and you're like,
which
oh.
I did. I did that today too.
But I mean, that happens. I mean, that's good. That means you like what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's why you're there.
Well, I sure liked what we were doing. So, in essence, and you're tying those together with blood knot, and then I noticed you were going loop to loop on the wire.
Yeah, I just do. You know, we're not. It's as big as these fish are, in short bursts of speed, super strong. You don't have to overthink that part, in my mind. I don't think you need to. I mean, you can get super technical with it and do biminies and all that, but you don't need it. I feel like whatever knot you feel comfortable with, and I've caught countless fish on a loop-to-loop deal, and it's super easy to change out if you need to. I would suggest do what you feel confident in, and knowing that knot's going to hold. I mean,
so you're going 40, which is usually around 24 thousandths. You're going 30, which is usually around 22 thousandths, and then you're just you're just going loop to the wire.
Yep. And I will say that if I'm going lighter on the like 30 pound, I use 30 pound when it's really clear. I use 40 generally all the time. But if I go down on line size, even 30, and I'm using that super small wire, I'll run that loop through there twice to kind of give more of a figure 8, so you're not getting that cut in as much.
Yeah.
And that's I haven't had one fail on me yet.
It's the same thing that we do backing to attach your fly line. You know, that's how Flip taught us to do that, is go through twice. That way you've got, I believe if I'm saying this right, you've got 4 pressure points instead of 2 pressure points.
Yeah.
It might not be the right terminology,
I failed math,
but
yeah. So I believe it.
This is 4. This is 2. Well, that's awesome, man. And once again, I just learned so much. I've just learned quite a bit about rigging. I know our folks watching did too, and really just awesome. And you know, I can't wait to come back and do this. So, thanks for sharing all this with us, man. And you know, we'll do it again sometime real soon.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming down.
If you like this video, hit subscribe. It helps out a lot. And check out these videos. We think you might like them too.